Well, there, very good evening. This is the weekend edition of Primetime News on TV1 for the News First, where the people come first. I'm Martin Satyanes, and let's start off with a look at your headlines for this evening.
President extends invitation to form all-party government. A declaration against suppression signed in Colombo. Court action against protesters illegally occupying Galle-Face protest site. Public Securities Ministry issues a warning. Sri Lanka wins first medal at Commonwealth Games 2022. School activities on 3 days next week.
Main sponsor.
Earn a highest interest rate of 21% for 4 months fixed deposits. LB Yasaisuru.
Now the stories in detail. President Ranil Wickremesinghe paid homage to the historic Temple of the Tooth relic in Kandy today.
The president was welcomed by Diyavadana Nilame Pradeep Nilangadala. This marks Ranil Wickremesinghe's first visit to the Temple of the Sacred Tooth since taking office as president. The head of state wrote a commemorative note on the special book at the temple. Thereafter, the president visited and obtained blessings from leader of the Malnutrition chapter of the Siam sect, Most Venerable Tibbatu Airways Sri Sumangala Thero. The president also visited the leader of the Asgiri chapter of the Siam sect, Most Venerable Warakagoda Sri Jnanaratana Thero.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe has invited all MPs to unite for an all-party government. The President's media division announced that the President has made the request from the members of Parliament in writing.
The President's letter to the MP states that the government is making great efforts to gradually restore the political, economic and social situation in the country following recent incidents of anarchy. It further states that plans are being prepared for the implementation of an orderly economic reforms program, adding that necessary steps are being taken to create economic stability. President Wickremesinghe in his letter states that in order to successfully overcome the existing challenges, a program must be implemented with the participation of all the political parties represented in Parliament. Accordingly, in order to fulfill this national responsibility, the President expects the support of parliamentarians and parties to build a broad dialogue on the next steps, including the 19th Amendment to the Constitution and reintroduction of the parliamentary committee system. Meanwhile, the Tamil National Alliance expressed the following views regarding the matter in Vavuniya today. Sambandhan, the leader of our party, had received a letter. Then I received it. Our hope is that there should be an all-party government for a short period. Political stability requires it, but all the parties should unite. Otherwise, if only the members of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna join together to form a government, it will not be an all-party government. We appreciate the President saying that an all-party government should be established, but it should be a true one. We cannot be an all-party government in which the SLPP has full power.
ஜனாதிபதி ரணில் விக்ரமசிங்க சொல்வதற்கு நாங்கள் ஆதரவு தெரிவிக்கிறோம். ஆனால் அது வெளிப்படையாக உண்மைத்தன்மையுள்ள ஒரு சர்வகட்சி ஆட்சியாக அமைய வேண்டும்.
The President expressed the following views at the President's house in Kandy today. This country was economically pressured. A political crisis arose as a result of that. I became President as a result of this crisis. Dinesh Gunawardena was appointed Prime Minister. Our former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigned. That's the crisis. This crisis took place due to economic reasons, nothing else. However, external forces joined these protests and the Aragalaya in an unexpected manner and hid behind the guise of the struggle. For the first time in Sri Lankan history, we faced the threat of fascist terrorism. A large upheaval occurred. It was only after that I took up the presidency. Now some say that the economic crisis is a result of former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa not importing fertilizer. We say from our party that the economic crisis is a result of not going to the IMF on time. The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna says that the economic crisis was caused due to not only the current administration but because the administration before that took large loans. So we have all these reasons. What do we do? Do we debate these reasons or should we continue forward? Some are holding parades and protesting, chanting Ranil go home. I say please don't do that. I don't have a home to go to. If they can, they should bring along a large crowd to reconstruct my house in 6 months. After my home is built and I am at home, then they can pass by demanding that I go home.
මට යන්න ගියක් නෑ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ ලෑස්ති නම් විශාල සෙනඟක් ගේන්න මාස 6කට මම ගෙදර හදලා දෙන්න. මගේ ගෙදර හදලා මං ගියන් පස්සේ ගෙදර පහු කරලා යන්න රනිල් ගෙදර යන්න කියලා.
A conference against suppression was held in Colombo today.
Several groups, including the Galle-faced protesters, political parties, trade unions and others took part in the event. A joint statement against suppression was issued at the event. The statement included several demands. Number 1, put an immediate stop to undemocratic arrests, abductions and suppression. Number 2, laws such as the Emergency Law and Prevention of Terrorism Act be revoked. Number 3, ensure basic human rights. Number 4, provide relief to people burdened by the economic crisis. The publication was signed by many groups thereafter. We are questioning whether the political leaders are trying to make the situation similar to that of 88 and 89. On behalf of the country and those who get arrested, we can go and hand ourselves over to the authorities. We will work with the Aragalaya. We can strengthen its voice. There are 2 points Aragalaya should focus on. One is the president, the other is the parliament. Both those positions must be attacked. The most effective attack against the parliament is to dissolve it. The people have a right to surround parliament since they elected it. Stones will not be used in this political attack. We don't consider the letter sent by the President to MPs inviting them to build an all-party government as the ethical mechanism. If the President sent letters to the party leaders, they must make a decision. We see this as the President's way of awarding privileges with an eye towards parliamentary elections. His Excellency the President, I beg your pardon, I cannot say that anymore. President Wickremesinghe invited us party leaders for a discussion to form an all-party government. I will go there and request that suppression be halted. We will not hesitate to tell him. They are turning this struggle into one that arrests and suppresses only us, but the people of this country are involved in this struggle. This is the theme of this struggle. Ranil Wickremesinghe does not have a creative solution to help this country. This politics does not include creativity. Only the Aragalaya can supply that. The decision to hold a series of protests on a national scale against suppression was reached at the event. With the participation of all factions, we propose a series of protests on a national level be carried out against suppression, demanding the release of those who were arrested. At this point, everyone must be protected. The entire population is burdened. They are attacking and arresting those who take to the streets unable to bear the problems. Suppressing a minority is wrong. Let us implement this process.
The Ministry of Public Security says legal action will be instituted against people who continue to illegally occupy the Galle-faced protest site. Its Secretary S. Hettiarachchi says legal action will be taken against them on the charges of unauthorized construction and unauthorized occupation of the respective lands owned by the state, including the Urban Development Authority and Ports Authority. The Secretary says instructions have been issued for the relevant activities. Security camera footage and video footage of the respective areas will be issued to identify the individuals. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Public Security says that steps will be taken to monitor the telephone conversations and bank accounts of the people who are currently in custody in connection with the Aragalaya. Ministry Secretary S. Hettiarachchi said that investigations are being carried out by several teams, including the police and CID.
The fuel shortage has become one of the main factors aggravating the economic crisis. Fuel distribution is still being carried out across the island based on the last digit of the vehicle registration number system and the national fuel pass. From Monday, fuel will only be distributed to those who have registered and obtained their national fuel pass, also known as the QR code system. Meanwhile, 10 situations were reported from filling stations today as well. A heated situation arose near a filling station in Kurunagala today as the filling station has issued 5 litres of fuel each to a group of members of the Kurunagala Cooperative Society. The people who were waiting in fuel queues arrived at the Kurunagala Cooperative Society building. Later the police arrived there and tried to inspect the building, but the chairman of the Kurunagala Cooperative Society, Jayapatma Vanninayaka, obstructed the police officers and said that it was not possible to inspect the building. The police seized the fuel stocks and took them for further inspection. An individual was arrested for coming to the Pulonarua Hinguragoda cooperative filling station yesterday carrying an axe and behaving provocatively. Our correspondent said that due to this, the fuel distribution from the filling station was paused at midnight yesterday. Maharagama IOC filling station also received fuel today and long queues were seen at the station.
Police bikes
are pumped full tanks, 3,000 rupees and 4,000 rupees. They cannot even run 20 or 25 kilometers. They don't know what they are doing.
News First with the people.
Main sponsor.
Earn a highest interest rate of 21% for 4 months fixed deposits. LB Yasaisuru.
The Lanka Isuru Kumara won the first medal for Sri Lanka at the Commonwealth Games for weightlifting today. He competed in the 55 kilogram weight category and won the bronze medal at the event. He lifted a weight of 105 kilograms in the snatch category while lifting 120 kilograms in the clean and jerk. In total, he lifted 225 kilograms. At the same event, the gold medal was won by the Malaysian athlete Muhammad Anik, who created a new competition record, while silver went to India's Sankit Mahadev.
I am very happy that I got a medal for my country. Also, a lot of people helped me to succeed at this tournament. Although I cannot remember their names at this time, I would like to take this opportunity to thank them all.
How will government and government-approved private schools be conducted during this coming week? A discussion was held under the chairmanship of the Minister of Education today to discuss this issue.
Schools going to operate this week. As was implemented last week, the Ministry of Education decided to conduct government and government-approved private schools for 3 days a week from August 1st to 5th. Accordingly, it has been decided to conduct schools on Monday, Tuesday and Thursday. Wednesday and Friday will be utilized for home learning and online teaching. School activities can continue on Wednesdays and Fridays with the consent of principals and teachers and the approval of the respective zonal education director for schools with inadequate transport facilities. Meanwhile, the application period for recruiting students for the first grade for the year 2023 has been extended until the 15th of August. Schools in Sri Lanka remained closed for many days in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID-19. According to the data presented by the Sri Lanka Teachers Association, in the year 2020, out of 194 days, schools were limited to just 77 days. And although schools were supposed to be open for 210 days in the year 2021, classes were conducted for just 70 days in total. Will Smith's apology.
My behavior was unacceptable.
More news follows after this short commercial break.
මොකද මහත්තයා මේ?
නෑනේ ගෙදර සිංක් එකේ
අයි මහත්තයා ස්ලෝන් නෙවෙයිද දැම්මේ?
හදිස්සියට බාලා පයිප් එකක් දැම්මේ. නැද්ද මුදලාලි ඊයේ පෙරේදා කඩේ රිපෙයාර් කරන්න ගෙනාපු ගම් චුට්ටක්.
මේ වගේ ප්‍රශ්න වලට හොඳම විසඳුම ස්ලෝන් ගම් චුට්ටක්. හැබැයි ඉක්මනින් දාගන්න ස්ලෝන් පයිප් එකක්.
ස්ලෝන් ගම් චුට්ටා හැම ගෙදරකම සිටිය යුතු ජලනල කාර්මිකයා. දැන් රඟම ග්‍රොසරියෙන් මිලදී ගන්න.
Welcome back to the news. Venerable Omalpe Sobithatero expressed the following views at a People Assembly today.
Meanwhile, Venerable Omalpe Sobithatero expressed these views at a press conference by the People's Assembly today.
ජනාධිපති රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්මයා ලිපි මගින් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා ඒ පක්ෂ.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe is asking the respective parties to come forward and form an all-party government by writing letters. But in the meantime, there is suppression against the respective groups that have conducted public protests. Is this an attempt to suppress people by misusing the concept of an all-party government? The public did not call for Ranil Wickremesinghe to become president. What he wants is to somehow hold on to power he has gained under the guise of the constitution. The Malnutrition chapter presented a solution we highly appreciate. That is, conduct a general election, giving the people the opportunity to appoint the most suitable and honest public representatives.
පසුගියදා මල්ලතු මහා විහාරයෙන් ඉදිරිපත් වුණා. අපි ඒ විසඳුම අතිශයින්ම අගය කරනවා. ඒ තමයි ජනතාවට අවස්ථාව ලබා දෙන්න වඩාත් නිවැරදි සහ අවංක මහජන නියෝජිතයන් පත් කර ගැනීමට ඒ සඳහා මහමැතිවරණයක් පැවැත්වීම අත්‍යවශ්‍යයි කියන අදහස.
The Thun Hele National Movement convened a media briefing in Colombo today. It is not a good thing to forget the service rendered by a person like Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He served the country by putting aside jealousy, anger and revenge. He came here on our request by letting go of his American citizenship and got kicked out from here. He now has no place to stay anywhere in the world. He should have the right to come back to his own country. We have now removed a president who was appointed for a period of 5 years. So with that political collapse, a new president has now been sworn in. The economy has also collapsed along with the appointment of this new president. The frustration of the youth has also become a major problem in this country right now. What will happen to this country if this Aragalaya continues? That is a big question. As religious leaders, we are not really happy to see a Sri Lankan citizen living in exile anywhere in the world. Enough of commotions, enough of protests. We would like to kindly request to let the president govern this country and carry out his responsibilities for at least the next 5 months without creating any pressure and disturbance.
බොහොම කරුණාවෙන් මේ මොහොතේ සිහිපත් කරනු ලබනවා. මට මෙහි උරුවැසියෙක් ඉන්න පුළුවන් එතුමාට කරේ තනතුරෙන් ඉවත් වෙන්න කියන එක තමයි. මාලදිවයිනේ හිටියා එතනින්.
He was in Maldives and he left to Singapore and later he left from there. There are international movements backing them. Don't allow these forces to prevent the man who ended the 30-year war from entering the country again.
Sri Lanka is facing crises in many fronts today. Let's look at some of the incidents that brought us to this situation today.
Have we forgotten? The Sri Lankan people are spending most of their time languishing in queues while the country's economy is also in crisis. Productivity of Sri Lanka and its people has come to a standstill due to the foreign reserve crisis. In the midst of all of these, politicians are on the battle path for power. Bear in mind that the country did not fall on its knees overnight. February 2015, the first bond scam. Loss 688 million rupees. March-April 2016, the second bond scam took place at 2 controversial auctions. Loss yet to be calculated, but it cost a loss of 8 billion rupees to the Employees' Provident Fund. This was a direct blow to the already ailing economy, which was suffering the consequences of previously made poor decisions. Do you remember the infamous Greek bonds? According to reports, Sri Lanka investing in Greek bonds suffered a loss of more than 2.3 billion or 2,300 million rupees. At the same time, the infamous hedging agreement to purchase crude oil for Sri Lanka caused massive losses to the state while lining the pockets of a few. Unfortunately, Sri Lankan people are yet to see any final progress report on these investigations. During a period when scrutinized decisions were expected to be made, those in power decided to spend millions to construct the Lotus Tower and even built a conference hall in the middle of nowhere. The much-hyped port, built in a similar fashion, does not attract many ships, and the airport located next to it does not attract flights except for the birds. These are various concerns as to where these so-called development projects were launched with proper planning. Those in power also spent millions of taxpayers' money to rent massive buildings for state bodies to move into. But those buildings were just left empty for years. The dairy heifers projects that were hyped up for farmers were also marred with corruption and fraud.
Data released by the Sri Lanka Customs shows earnings from merchandise exports increased by 20% to $1.2 billion in June 2022. This is according to a report by the Export Development Board on Sri Lanka's export performance in June 2022.
The Export Development Board report says that earnings from merchandise exports increased by 20% to $1,208.2 million in June 2022. The export earnings increase mainly due to the increase in earnings from sectors such as tea and spices and concentrates, apparel and textiles, rubber-based products, coconut-based products, electrical and electronic components, food and beverage, seafood and ornamental fish. During June 2022, exports to the United States increased by 46.16% to $324 million. $1.6 billion worth of exports to the US had been recorded in total in the period of January to June 2022. Although exports to India increased by 21.24% to $437 million, exports to Pakistan have decreased by 8.31% to $41 million during the period of January to June 2022 in comparison with the same months last year.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka has called for all market players to be fully compliant with regulations imposed to ease the current economic hardships on the people.
Issuing a communique, the government and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka points out that several measures have been implemented to ease the burden of the current economic hardships on the people. The success of these regulatory measures and the ability to achieve the intent outcomes depend on the support and cooperation from the trading community and the banking system. However, CBSL states that it has been brought to notice that certain market players are not being fully compliant with these regulations. According to the release, in the best best interests of the nation, the CBSL reiterates to all stakeholders of the economy that going forward, all efforts will be taken to strictly monitor and ensure compliance with all regulations on foreign exchange transactions, including repatriation requirements of exports proceeds, conversions and mandatory sales to the CBSL, etc. CBSL emphasizes any instances of non-compliance will be dealt with stern action within the provisions of all applicable laws.
The Finance Ministry says the authorities have engaged in discussions with the IMF with a view towards entering into an extended financing facility to support Sri Lanka's macroeconomic reform program.
The Ministry of Finance, Economic Stabilization and National Policies in a press release said, after meetings with the IMF in April this year, a virtual mission took place in early May, followed by an IMF mission to Colombo from the 20th to the 30th of June. Thereafter, discussions continued virtually with a view to reaching a staff-level agreement, while substantial progress was made during discussions on the fiscal, monetary and structural reforms necessary to stabilize the economy. The Finance Ministry said social unrest and political instability, which led to several changes in administration since May, delayed making a significant progress towards reaching a staff-level agreement. However, with the formation of the new government, technical discussions between the Sri Lankan authorities and the IMF have now resumed with a view to finalizing the few remaining policy matters that need to be agreed upon prior to reaching a staff-level agreement. The Finance Ministry release goes on to note a staff-level agreement would be an important milestone towards IMF board approval for the EFF program, which in turn would help unlock bridging finance to support much-needed external financing for Sri Lanka. The release says, in parallel, Sri Lankan authorities are working with debt restructuring advisors Lazard and Clifford Chance to reach consensus on debt restructuring arrangements with creditors. The advisors have made considerable progress in the analytical framework for debt operation prior to formal engagements with Sri Lanka's creditors. The Finance Ministry adds the government is committed to engaging its creditors in good faith with a view to reaching a comprehensive debt restructuring program that provides a fair and sustainable outcome for all stakeholders.
Earlier on the bulletin, we highlighted how some ad hoc decisions has affected the economic. Let's now look at what has happened after 2019.
To change all of this, a new administration was brought in 2019. The first thing the new government did upon being elected was to cut down on taxes. More than 600 billion rupees was lost due to these tax cuts. At the same time, the government granted tax relief to their close associates. On the 14th of October, the government decided to reduce the special commodity levy imposed on imported sugar from 50 rupees per kilogram to 25 cents per kilogram. Later, it was revealed that from the 14th of October 2020 to 20th February 2021, 320,000 metric tons of sugar was imported into the country. A lion's share of this amount, that's 40%, was imported by one single importer. A special audit revealed that within 4 months of reducing the tax, the government was deprived of tax revenue of whopping 16.763 billion rupees. The government banned the imports of chemical fertilizers and agrochemicals, including insecticides and herbicides, completely ruining the agriculture system. Farmers were forced out onto the streets and agri-production declined rapidly. The government pushed aside the expert advice from intellectuals and experts from the field and implemented their ad hoc decision, leading the country's economy to a crisis. As chaos ensued, experts warned that the country will not be able to serve its debt installments. This was the government's response at the time.
We will be able to settle the loan without any issue. We are working on it and we can assure you that.
Experts, intellectuals and even the media repeatedly pointed out the need to approach the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund as the country continued to plunge into crisis. But what did the government say to that?
From 2016 to 2019, the country was governed according to the conditions of the IMF. The fuel price formula was based on those conditions. That is also how the taxes were increased. All those measures failed.
The World Food Programme says that nearly 5 million people in Sri Lanka are skipping meals and suffering from hunger. Unicef said that Sri Lanka has the second highest child malnutrition rate in the whole of South Asia and is ranked the 7th in the world, a list that we should not be proud of. Food inflation in Sri Lanka spiked up to 90.9%. Experts, intellectuals and the media highlighted this situation back then with the warning signs. If the necessary, appropriate decisions were made back then, we would not be in this position today. Therefore, if we are to decide, it's important to keep the dark lessons of the past in mind when doing so. We care less of party differences. We report for the people. We report for the betterment of the people. We report for the people of Sri Lanka who love the country.
China says it expects that Sri Lanka's discussions with the IMF will be successful, as China too is a member of the IMF. Ambassador of China Xi Zhenhong stated this during a meeting with Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena at the Prime Minister's office yesterday. According to a release issued by the Prime Minister's office, the Chinese ambassador assured that the necessary support will be provided in the meeting of the IMF Board of Directors. During the meeting, the importance of strengthening the existing economic, agricultural and cultural relations between China and Sri Lanka in the face of the current economic crisis was emphasized. Appreciating the assistance provided by China to alleviate the current economic crisis in Sri Lanka, the Prime Minister said Sri Lanka would welcome direct private investments as well as investments in agriculture, renewable energy, irrigation and water supply sectors to provide long-term solutions to the economic issues. Moving along, the Ministry of Defense has confirmed that the Chinese research and survey vessel Yuan Wang 5 has arrived at the Hambanthur port. This is according to a report by The Hindu. The Sri Lankan Defence Ministry media spokesman has told The Hindu that the vessel will be in Hambanthur from August 11th to the 17th, mainly for replenishment including fuel. Days after denying reports of the scheduled arrival of a Chinese research vessel, Sri Lanka's Ministry of Defence has confirmed that the vessel had sought clearance to call at the southern Hambanthur port in August. The ship's arrival follows New Delhi's clear message about carefully monitoring the development and the Chinese Foreign Ministry defending its arrival, citing that Beijing had always excised freedom of the high seas lawfully. In international news, an explosion went off in Kabul's main cricket stadium during a game today, wounding 4 spectators and briefly halting the game. The blast happened at a match between two sides in the country's domestic T20 league held at the Kabul International Cricket Stadium.
A spokesperson for the Kabul police said the explosion was caused by a grenade. The blast injured 4 spectators, according to Afghanistan Cricket Board Chief Executive Nasib Khan. He added that the players, staff members and foreigners were all safe. A US statement said a top UN official, Ramis Al-Akbarov, who was present at the stadium, condemned the atrocious attack. The UN humanitarian coordinator for Afghanistan, Al-Akbarov, said, quote, "Today's blast is yet another harrowing reminder of the terrifying and sudden violence that the population of Afghanistan continues to be exposed to," end quote. Friday is a weekly holiday in the country and a sizable crowd had gathered to watch the game. This year's edition of the Cricket League, its 8th season, is the first such tournament since the Taliban seized power in August last year.
Actor Will Smith issued a fresh apology for slapping comedian Chris Rock at the Oscars in March in a new YouTube video.
In the video titled "It's Been a Minute," Smith addresses a number of questions and says he's reached out to Chris Rock.
I've reached out to Chris, and the message that came back is that He's not ready to talk, and when he is, he will reach out. So I will say to you, Chris, I apologize to you. My behavior was unacceptable, and I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. I spent the last 3 months replaying and understanding the nuances and the complexities of what happened in that moment. I'm not going to try to unpack all of that right now. There's no part of me that thinks that's the optimal way to handle a feeling of disrespect or insults. You know, I made a choice on my own, from my own experiences, from my history with Chris. Jada had nothing to do with it. And say sorry to my kids and my family for the heat that I brought on all of us. To all my fellow nominees.
According to Australian media, a total of 125 Sri Lankan nationals were sent back to Sri Lanka in June after being found on board intercepted vessels.
The Australian Border Force released its monthly Operation Sovereign Borders update, which covered the period from June 1st to June 30th, the first full month of the Anthony Albanese government. The Australian Border Force report said, quote, during this reporting period, Australian authorities intercepted 4 maritime people smuggling ventures from Sri Lanka with a total of 125 Sri Lankan nationals on board, unquote. It also added that all 125 passengers and crew were safely returned to Sri Lanka in close cooperation with the Sri Lankan government.
The Divi Savya program to uplift the lives of poverty-stricken families was held for the 24th day today. The program is supported by LOLC Holdings.
Today, essential relief packages were distributed among families in the Puttalam district. Divi Savya is conducted to help people who struggle to meet their day-to-day needs. Dry rations were distributed among low-income families in Navagattegama area. LOLC supported the people in Chilau, Mahava today.
Senior medical professionals have issued a statement highlighting that they are concerned about the possible undesirable effects of a state of emergency.
The senior medical professionals issuing a joint statement say that they have directed a letter addressing all parliamentarians requesting them not to approve the emergency laws in the parliament. However, their request went unheeded. According to the release, it can be observed that the full force of emergency regulations being applied mainly to punish and silence the Aragalaya activists. The release reads, "We wish to reiterate our initial position that the uprising, which appeared to be concentrated in the Galle Face, was in fact the culmination of the widespread discontent of all sectors of the population throughout the country against the economic difficulties brought on mainly by the corrupt political system pervading Sri Lankan society. Thereby, the medical professionals have demanded, as a matter of extreme urgency, that the rulers immediately withdraw the state of emergency and apply the normal laws of the country, which are quite adequate to deal with any alleged offences."
From that, we bring to a close this edition of Primetime News on TV1. For details of the stories and much more, simply log on to our website www.newsfirst.lk. For the Newsfirst, where the people come first, I'm Martin Santines, and you take care and good night.